I ate nothing for 7 days. My brain started thinking in a language I didn't recognize. I want to start with something the hunger researchers call the clarity paradox. By every measurable standard, a brain without food for 72 hours should be performing worse. Reaction time slower, memory degraded, cognitive function declining. The brain runs on glucose. Remove the glucose and the system should degrade. This is basic physiology. And yet, the documented reports from extended fasting describe something the physiology does not predict. A specific quality of mental experience that arrives somewhere between day 3 and day 5. Not confusion. The opposite. A clarity so precise and so unusual that the people who experience it consistently reach for the same word, sharp, as if something that had been running constantly in the background, something they had never noticed because it had always been running, had finally gone quiet. And in the quiet, the actual signal had become audible for the first time. I wanted to find out what that signal was. This was my first mistake. My second mistake was not fully reading what happens on day 6. The setup. I am not a person who fasts. Food is a thing that happens 3 times a day and solves a problem. I had read the research. I consulted a doctor who told me 7 days of water fasting was medically inadvisable without supervision. I arranged supervision. Blood panels before, midway, and after. The numbers never indicated I needed to stop. What happened instead was something the numbers don't measure. Water only, no juice, no broth, nothing. A camera in the corner of the living room. By now, a familiar fixture of these experiments. Monday was easy, easier than it had any right to be. The absence of food felt less like deprivation and more like postponement, the body treating it as a delayed meal rather than an ended one. By Tuesday afternoon, the postponement had ended and the hunger had arrived. Days 2 and 3, the noise. The hunger on day 2 was not what I expected. I had anticipated something physical and locatable. What arrived instead occupied a much larger territory, not just the stomach, the mind, a specific quality of mental preoccupation with food I had no previous reference for. I thought about food constantly, not craving thoughts, inventory thoughts. My brain had begun cataloging, running through everything I had eaten in the previous week, everything in the kitchen, everything I had ever eaten thoughtlessly and now wished I had paid attention to. Relentless and automatic. I couldn't choose not to do it. By day 3, the cataloging had escalated into something I can only describe as food language. My thinking had restructured itself around food without my choosing it. The afternoon light looked warm, and I noted it as golden. A feeling of something almost completing resolved in my mind as something cresting. Even my sense of time was being expressed in meal-sized units, not hours, but the spaces between meals that no longer existed. The brain had lost one of its primary organizing structures, and had begun reconstructing everything in terms of the thing that was missing. This was the noise. Day 4. The shift. Somewhere on day 4, something changed. I cannot give you a precise time. I know it was afternoon. I know I had been on the couch. I know it happened because I remember the before and the after with the clarity of someone who has crossed a threshold. Not a gradual change, but a crossing. The food noise stopped, not reduced, stopped. The cataloging, the preoccupation, the food-adjacent metaphors, all of it simply ceased, the way weather changes. One moment it was there, then it wasn't. My thinking was quiet in a way I had never experienced while awake. Not the quiet of tiredness. I was not foggy or slow or reduced. It was the quiet of a room after a loud party has ended. The furniture was still there. But the noise was gone, and in its absence the room was simply available. In a way, it had not been available before. I thought about things I had been meaning to think about for months, problems I had been circling, decisions I had been deferring. In the quiet of day 4, these things didn't feel heavy or urgent. They felt accessible, like books on a shelf I could simply reach for without the usual resistance. I solved a problem that evening. A specific professional problem I had been unable to resolve for 6 weeks. Within 20 minutes, I had seen not just the solution but the reason I had been unable to see it. The emotional obstruction disguised as a practical one. The thing I had been protecting that I needed to stop protecting. I wrote in my journal, I think I understand what the noise was for. Days 5 and 6. The language. Day 5 was the day the language arrived. The clarity had deepened from quiet to something more active. My thinking had become faster and more associative, not scattered, but connected in ways my ordinary thinking rarely achieves. Ideas normally kept in separate mental compartments had begun to find each other. A thought about a conversation 3 years ago, connected to something I was feeling that morning, connected to something I had read years before, connected to something I hadn't understood at the time, and now suddenly did. As if my brain was running a different version of itself, a version that had always been there, but that normally had insufficient processing power, because the processing power was being used on the noise. I called it a language because it felt like a language, more precise, more connected, more native to whatever I actually am underneath the habits of ordinary consciousness. Not a mystical experience. My actual mind, running without the usual overhead. I did not want it to stop. Day 6. I had spent 6 days without the background hum of food, the planning of it, the anticipation, the ritual, the social architecture built around it. And I had discovered that a significant portion of what I had assumed was my personality, my daily mental life, my felt sense of who I was in any given moment, had been the food noise, not me, the noise around the food. I didn't know, sitting there on day 6, who I was going to be when the noise came back. Day 7, Sunday morning. I broke the fast at noon with water diluted with a small amount of juice, the medically recommended protocol. The first taste of something other than water after 7 days was not pleasurable. It was overwhelming, too loud, too present. The flavor hit my system with the force of something I was entirely unprepared for, and I sat with the glass in both hands for a long time without drinking more. The noise returned over the following days. The food thoughts, the planning, the anticipation, all of it came back as my system resumed normal function. The clarity faded, not immediately, not completely, but it faded the way a very vivid dream fades, the details going first, then the emotional texture, until what remains is the knowledge that something happened in the partial memory of what it felt like. I had known it would fade. I had not fully believed it until it did. What I know now. The clarity paradox is real. The brain, denied its ordinary fuel, does not degrade. It shifts to ketones, which the liver begins producing after 72 hours of fasting. Whether the clarity is the ketones or the absence of noise or both, I cannot tell you. The researchers disagree. What I can tell you is what I found in the quiet. The problem solved on day 4 had been waiting 6 weeks. The connections on day 5 I have not been able to reproduce since. The language, that more precise, more native version of my own thinking, I have caught glimpses of it in the month since. Usually early in the morning, before the day has started and the noise has resumed, usually briefly, usually gone before I can fully inhabit it. What the 7 days were was a window. Looking through it at a version of my own mind that ordinary daily life does not make visible. What I saw through that window was someone who thinks more clearly than I usually do. I am still trying to find ways to reach them without going 7 days without eating. The most reliable method is the one I keep returning to from all these experiments. Quiet, just a moment of it, early in the morning, before the noise starts up again. In that moment, the window is still there, and the person on the other side is still thinking in that language, still waiting for me to be quiet enough to hear them.